All right, well, it's a minute past. How about we go ahead and get started? And folks, I'm sure will trickle in as we get a little bit farther. All right, so just a few housekeeping items. If you have any challenges with Zoom or anything like that, please post in the chat and Elaine will get you figured out. We will send out a recording to everybody following this so you guys can go through and follow along and see all the content at a slower pace if you'd like. And as always, if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A section, and we will go through that at the end. All right, so really excited to be able to meet with everybody today. Just going to go through a little demo of our platform and show just how easy it is to get started with everything. So by way of quick introductions, I'm Brian Wellens. I oversee the solutions engineering and sales enablement team. And I'm really excited to be able to do this here with Dave Honan. I've worked with him for a really long time. Dave, you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, I'm David Honan. I'm a staff solutions engineer, about 2 years in at Nylas here, but I do bring several years of experience with iPaaS, REST APIs, developer platforms, and if you're interested, a fun fact is years ago, I actually co-wrote the world's first ATM locator for Visa. So I'm excited to present to you today and get you started on Nylas.
Great. Yeah, really looking forward to it. All right, so before we dive into the demonstration itself, I wanted to do a little bit of level setting on who is Nylas, what are we doing today, and kind of what are we excited about. And so our mission statement is really to turn communication into inspiration. And really what Nylas is we're a developer platform that allows our customers, primarily developers and product managers, to be able to connect to the contents of communication data and put it to work. And really, we've had a really exciting last few years. We were able to raise $175 million from some incredible folks like Tiger Global, ABC, Stripe Brothers, and so on. That's been really exciting and really kind of helped validate the market that we're in. We have about 1,000 customers today across a number of verticals. And one really interesting fact is that customers who are doing some of the really complex work with Google that requires some security audits, and a majority of those folks are running on Nylas. And that's really just a demonstration of how easy we make it for our customers. To talk about one of those customers, I want to talk very briefly about Pipedrive. Pipedrive is a CRM customer. They joined us really early in our journey, and they were able to leverage the Nylas platform to not have to compromise their roadmap or the developers and really be able to drive these communication features into their platform. And you can see here that they not only built those features, but they also used them to drive customers into more of the premium tiers, which resulted in a pretty significant increase in ARR. And before I turn it over to DH to go through kind of the flow and kind of walk you through how easy it is to get started, I just wanted to do a really quick level set on the Nylas platform and really the business problem that we solve. And really what we're doing is we're allowing you to focus on your customers and not infrastructure. Nylas is a better way to think about it is we do a lot of the work that you shouldn't so that you can do the work that you really want to be able to do. And really what Nylas does as a platform is we take away all the complexity and the challenges of the various email providers in the world, all of the legacy versions of Outlook and some of the things like Yahoo and AOL and some of the more modern tools like Gmail. And we compile all of those into one simple REST API so that your developers and customers can access that data to drive powerful features. And a couple of quick things that are really valuable that our customers have found to be great. One is our webhooks. So we do a lot of work to try to manage change management, and the value to you and to the customer base is really that anything that happens either inside of your platform or outside, maybe you have sales reps, those sales reps use their cell phone at the airport, all of that flows seamlessly between your platform and the email service provider so everybody has like a truly seamless experience. And additionally, most of what we're going to talk about today is our REST API. We do have other solutions. Streams, as we call it, is really more of an ETL tool that allows some of our customers to be able to load this data into many of the data warehouses and big tools that they use for data analysis. All right, great. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave to go through the demo. And again, please feel free to add any questions in the Q&A section. All right, Dave, take it away.
Cool. Great. So yeah, you've kind of heard me referred to as Dave, David, and DH. So feel free, you guys, while we're on this call, we're all just friends. You can call me whatever you'd like, or DH sounds great. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to share my screen. Okay. Hopefully you're seeing my screen right now.
Looks great.
Okay, terrific. So really my objective for today is to really just give you that first technical look at the Nylas platform so that you can quickly start using our API endpoints and start to realize and bring to life some of your specific use cases. And feel free to follow along and set up your trial account as you go. I'm happy to work right through it with you. Okay, so first things first, what you want to do is go to nylas.com and you want to click on start a free trial. So when you do that, it will go in and ask you to fill out, your information and etc. It'll send you I'm actually logged into one already, but it'll send you type in your email, you go ahead and give it a password, and it'll send you a verification email. When you do that and you jump back in after it's delivered to you, it'll drop you right into our dashboard, and that looks just like this. Okay, this is exactly what you'll see. Okay, so what is the quick start? Well, as its name implies, it's a way to create a sample application and connect your test email accounts without having to go through the long process of creating a Google project or Azure app. And you can just use ours for trial purposes, because we've already done that for you, and you can use ours temporarily. Now, that said, in practice, you'll want to use your company's Google project or Azure app, and Nylas provides a full set of documentation to assist you with that process. So for demonstration purposes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect to a little account I have right here for a person named Taylor Ping, a fictitious person at Gulf Coal Creek, as right here. So we're just going to go in and type in Gulf Coal Creek at gmail.com, and we're going to go ahead and connect. And I'll mention something about this security here. So, so once we connect in, we'll authenticate in just like you would expect. We'll continue and authorize. Okay, and this is similar to what your customers would see in that process. And that drops us back onto the quick start page. Now back to that security part of it. If you're curious, or if InfoSec at your company is asking about how Nylas keeps all your data secure, you can learn more about that data retention policy via our website, or setting up some time to review with our team here at Nylas. But have no fear, we've got your data locked up securely, no worries there. So back to the quick start, you can now make your first API request. So we've connected into this account. Now it's given us a client ID and secret. Now this is going to be preset because you're using our account here, our QuickSet account, and you're going to have your access token here. Now jot this access token down, because you can only get it once and you may need it throughout that process. Okay, but we can give it a try. Whoops, got a little ahead of myself there. So if we can give it a try, we can go in and you'll see that you have a base URL, which is what you're going to be calling, an account information. So we're just going to go ahead and run and connect to Taylor Ping's account and run it. And you'll see that we can see information about that Google account, what we have resources for, everything else about it. Okay. Now, secondarily, you can also try some other things out. So for example, if you would like to see the full conversation history, which is what you're going to see in this inbox right here, okay, you can go in and run the conversation history, which is get messages. And we're going to set a limit of 5 messages and view the expanded view of it. And that same base URL, the bearer token, is going to be that access token that we were granted. And if I run this right now, you'll see that it'll pull back. Well, it's taking a second to sync. So we'll give it a second to sync. this will come back and it will pull back all of the messages that are in the inbox for Taylor Ping. Okay, so we'll come back and run that one again. Sometimes it takes a minute or two to initially sync the emails in the system with that. Okay, so let's go on to the next piece of this. So let's go look at the dashboard. So the dashboard right now, you're going to have the notion of your quick start app here. You can create new apps as you go along. Typically, you're going to have like a production application that you'll use. You have the playground here, and you have all of your app settings here. Okay, so you're going to be able to see, like, your client ID, your client secret for your accounts, all your advanced settings and your authentication. And this is where you're setting in like your Google Auth and your Office 365 Auth and things like that. Okay, so I want to show you how to create your own app now so you can move beyond the Quick Start app. And the way to do that is I'm just going to log out of this trial account or this Quick Start account that we have right here. And I'll log into one that I already have, one that already has my Google app and everything else set up on. Okay, let's log in. Okay, so it'll look exactly the same. You'll notice it has a Quick Start, but it also has a demo app. And in that demo app, I've actually connected 2 accounts already. That coldcreek.com for Taylor Ping. I also have my Nylas account up and running here as well. Okay, so the difference here is that in my app settings on this one, I already have my authentication set up with my Google Auth. Now, this is something that, if you're not familiar with what a Google app is and why that's required, and the same thing with Office 365, this is something that Google requires you to do. And it's something you'd have to do regardless of whether you used Nylas or not. And this really just allows you to authenticate, the users into your application, and that you can keep track of all of that. Now, for the Quick Start one we saw earlier, you were actually using a Nylas sample one that allows you to be able to do that. To see how to create a Google app, and I won't spend a lot of time on that right now, we actually take you through in a lot of detail exactly how to make that happen to have those settings correct. Okay, so let's go back now, and we can go back into our accounts running in my demo app. Look at the Cold Creek one that we had set up before that I've also connected to. And if we want, we can generate a new token right here. And this will take you through the process. This token is really your key to be able to access the email, calendar, and contact information for that Gulf Cold Creek account. Now, I'm going to go ahead and copy this. I'm going to set it up over to the side as well, just to make sure that we have it. And we can use that going forward. Now, you saw how you could run it in the playground, but if you want to, you can actually go into our documentation and run it there. So our documentation is very complete. It's very thorough. You can learn everything about the connectivity, the email, the APIs that we're using here. We have intelligence, the neural APIs, as well as streams, developer tools, everything you need here. But if you want to try out and run and see the details of the APIs, you can go ahead and click on reference, and I'll jump over to the Nylas API right here. So now if we want to get all the messages for that account that we just connected to, we can actually go into the documentation. You can see you can set up all your query string parameters, but we're going to need a bearer token in order to make this call through the docs. And that is that access token that we just, as soon as I move the Google or the Zoom stuff out of the way, that we just created. Let's set that. Okay, so we're good. We'll go back to the return all messages. And let's just say we're going to do the same thing we did before, expanded. Okay, and maybe limit equals 5. And now we can run the try it out here. And it will run that application and pull back the emails out of the inbox for Taylor Ping. Okay, so that's how you can run an API directly through our documentation and try it out from there. Now, for me, I am much more of a developer. I like to see and use Postman. So what I would suggest is you can use the playground in the quick start. You can run it through our documentation, or if you prefer to use a Postman, you can actually come into Postman and Nylas, search for that anywhere in our search box. And you can see that we have a full-on Postman collection. You can import the environment, you can configure it, and even use some auto-generated values to start using that. Now, from this perspective, I'm actually into Postman right now. And let's take and set that access token that we're just retrieving data with for Taylor Ping. Put that in here under our access token. And let's send an email from Taylor to Taylor's buddy, Joe Jeep, over here. Okay. And let's go back into Postman. And so we'll be sending the body of the email. Hey, Joe, let's meet up at the golf course and hit the driving range. Does Friday work for you? And let's meet up. And it's sending over to Joe Jeep. So I'm going to send this from Taylor's account to Joe Jeep directly. And when we do send that, you'll get a response back. And we will be able to go into this Jeep Fan 65, reset the email, and there it is. And it's important to note that this was sent through that connected API that we have at Nylas as Taylor Ping. It's not being sent from a no reply at or anything like that. This is directly out from Taylor's account as if Taylor had sent it directly through their client right there. Okay, so that should get you started. Anyways, there's certainly a lot more in there that we didn't cover, but you've now seen firsthand live how to really get started with Nylas, and kind of beyond what we touched on the surface today, specifically around sending and retrieving emails we saw today. But there are many additional API endpoints for calendar, contacts, neural intelligence, streams, and things like that. So feel free to browse and test out our platform. Thank you. And I'll turn it back to Brian.
Great. Thanks, DH. I really appreciate that. Definitely really fun to see how easy it is to use. So are there any questions in the chat, or anybody want to have questions that we can go through? I see one that's about the duration of the trial. So our trial today is 14 days. You're welcome to sign up for an account and play around just like DH has shown you today. And then as you work with our team here at Nylas, we're certainly happy to discuss how it works, how to get some extensions, and how to play around with some of our really deep machine learning and AI models as you want to get further and further into the capabilities. Are there any other questions? One in the chat here, I work with a lot of PII. Is your integration secure? How can I prove it to my manager? Oh, yeah, great question. So, from, DH touched a little bit on this, but our platform is secure. We've got a number of different certifications, as you'd expect, working with very large businesses, banks and e-commerce and shipping, logistics, and so on. They care a lot about security. So on our site, you can learn more about our security at a high level. And then as you connect with our team, we're happy to share our security white paper, as well as dive deep into our penetration tests and various security measures. But we're trusted by some of the largest brands in the world with some really incredibly sensitive data. But we're really excited to be able to offer this to our customer base and be able to help them drive the change they want in their business without having to build all the infrastructure. Can I use an email when testing, or should I be using Gmail? You can use any email provider that you would like. That's kind of the value of Nylas, as we take away kind of the pain of having to figure it out. I would say that Gmail is the easiest to register if you want to create a brand new or free account. You're welcome to use an Office 365 account at your business. You're welcome to set up a free Outlook account, iCloud, AOL, and so on. Gmail is what we tend to show because it's just super easy. And then why do I need a project? So the sort of concept of a project or an app is really just to create a centralization, an organization scheme. I think what's really important as you think about how to play around with Nylas is, we really meet customers where they're at, right? A lot of your customers are spending every day in the email inbox. And really the best way to play around with the capabilities is to really sort of dive into the free trial, explore it with our team, and really spend some time. So we've got a few minutes left in the webinar. Are there any other questions? I know that Elaine's had a few that we've had before that we've brought up. Anything else anybody's curious about? I'm sure you might have some other questions, and we're certainly happy to answer those as you play around with everything. Great. All right, well then, thanks everybody for coming. This is really just the tip of the iceberg. As DH said, there's a ton of capabilities in our platform and really help solve some really complex problems. And we encourage you to sign up for a free trial and play around, and then reach out to our team as you want to dive deeper, right? DH is on the team, I'm here. We're really happy to be able to walk through your use case and explain a lot of what our 1,000 customers have done today and how we might be able to help your business. All right, thanks everybody.